Hi, this is Phil Carlton. I was recently teaching a class and we were doing some encoring, and some of my students didn't realize you can encore more than one design at a time. So I want to talk a little about that today because it's a neat feature in our software that I don't think everyone knows about. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go over to the Super Design tab, and I'm going to change my category just to the flowers and leaves, and I'm going to grab this second little red flower here. The nice thing about the super designs, remember, is you can specify how large you want them to be. I'm going to bring this in at a height of 25 millimeters by setting the size to 25 and then clicking the green check mark to apply to bring it in. So I have that little red flower now. I'm going to go to the Home tab and I want a second flower, so I'm going to duplicate it. And on this one, I'm going to go over to my color list and I want this flower to be a different color so we can see the difference when we start encoring. So let's double click that and let's make it a nice light purple. Well, that looks like that's a dark orchid. That'll be good. So now I have two different designs. The first one I brought in was the red flower. The second one, or the one I duplicated, is this light purple one. Now let's go over to the Super Design tab and talk a little about, or the Encore tab, and talk a little about the Encore settings. I'm going to start by just encoring a single design, then we'll look at both of them. So if I'm encoring this flower, first of all, I'm going to start with the shape, a circle. So when I encore to a circle, I have a design selected. I tell it how many repeats I want. So if I want this to have 8 repeats, I just run the number of repeats up to 8 and click preview, and it puts 8 of them in a circle. Now I can grab any of these designs and pull them in or out and adjust how they fall in relationship to one another. When I've created the design that I like, I just come over and click the Apply button, the green check mark, and that will create the design. Notice up here under Arrangement, they're checked to be grouped. So they came in as one group, and I can tell they're grouped because I have these orange handles in the corners. The orange handles tell me I have multiple objects here, in this case 8 flowers, and they're separate objects still, but they're grouped together so I can move them or treat them as one. I'm going to hit undo now, so I just have the single flower. And then on my keyboard, I'm going to hold down the Control key and press A. Control A is select all. I could also go over to the Home tab and click select all, but Control A is an easy way to select everything that's in my work area. Now if I come in and encore these 2 flowers, it will alternate every other flower. So I start with my first flower at 12 o'clock, and then it spaces out the rest of them evenly, alternating between number 1, number 2, number 1, number 2, and so on and so on. Let's cancel that. The next one I want to look at is encoring to a line. So if I encore a single design to a line, it will just space out copies of that design. Now remember, we also do have the option to mirror. So right now I'm on standard, so all of the flowers are facing the same direction. If I go to mirror, then every other flower will be flipped. So if I click preview again, now you can notice that every other flower is mirrored. Now one of the things I like about working with Encore is if you don't like the setting or you want to change it, you don't always have to cancel out. I can make a selection, click preview, and then I can come over here and change my options to look at it a different way. I am going to go ahead and click cancel now. Now I'm going to do my Control A again to select both flowers. And this time let's go to, say, 7 repeats. When I click preview, now I have design number 1, design number 2, design number 1, design number 2. I have a handle over on the right side, and if I click and drag, I can space those out evenly. If I don't want them to be mirrored, I can come back and change it to standard, click preview again, and it will redisplay that encore, now with all the flowers facing the same direction. And again, I can space them out or adjust how they fall either closer or further apart. This is a great way if you're working with buttonholes in the hoop to get even buttonholes spread out for the back of a pillow or a garment. Let's go ahead and click cancel. I'm going to grab this flower again, and now let's look at the option to encore to a shape. And I'm going to encore. I think the triangle is going to make this easy to see. So I have the encore. So I have a single flower selected. I'm going to go to standard so that they're all facing the same direction. And I'm going to do a triangle. And I do have a setting here under number of repeats now for gap. So that's how much space will be between each flower. Let me show you how this works. If I click Preview, it's created a triangle, and the gap is adjusting the minimum amount of space that will show up. Now, we'll use the number of designs it needs to space out evenly. So if I make this larger or smaller, it will continue adding or taking out flowers until it creates the shape. If I adjust the gap here to say 5 millimeters and click Preview again, now there's a minimum of 5 millimeters between each one of the designs. I have a handle on the top where I can adjust the height. I have a handle on the right side where I can adjust the width. And if I hold down the Control key on my keyboard, it will adjust the height and the width at the same time, adding or removing flowers as it needs to build this shape. Now let's click Cancel. I'm going to go to Control A. So I have both of my flowers selected. Remember, flower number 1 is red. Flower number 2, or the second one that I brought in, is pink. If I had more than 2, it would just continue alternating between them. Now let's take the gap down. I'll leave the gap at 5. I'm going to click Preview. And what you will see is the first design that I brought in, that red flower, is going to be at the corners of my shape. And then it's going to use the second design between each of the corners. If I go to a different shape, say this diamond, when I click Preview, because the diamond has 4 corners, I'll have 4 of the red flowers and then 2 of the repeats of each one. If I take the gap down, say to 1 millimeter here, and click Preview, now it has room for 3 flowers between each one of the repeats. And then, of course, you can also adjust that shape as well, using the handles either on the top or the right side. The last one I want to look at is encoring to the hoop. So when I encore to the hoop, I have a couple of different options. I can tell it the margin. So the margin is going to be how far away from the edge of the hoop. So let's set the margin here to 5. Let's do 5 millimeters. And the gap is the minimum space between each design. So I'll set that to 5 millimeters as well. And click Preview. And you'll notice this design is about 5 millimeters in from the edge. And I have designs in the corners, and then it's using the gap to determine how many flowers is going to be in that space. If I go to a larger gap, it will make sure there's more space between each one of those flowers. Let's click Cancel. I'm going to click Control A one final time so that both of the flowers are selected. Now when I click Preview, my first design is going to go into my corners, and the second design will space out evenly between each corner to create a border all the way around the hoop. And this will size to whatever hoop I have selected. So if I click Cancel, I'm going to click Control H on my keyboard. So Control H is a quick way to bring up your hoop dialog box. Let's try the width here instead of 200 at 260 and click OK. So now, with my hoop selected, so I'm going to an Encore, Layout to the Hoop. I'm going to click Preview. I end up again with the designs in the corner, and this time it had to space out 5 flowers across the top because my hoop is wider than it is tall, and then it only needed 3. And again, if I change this gap to, say, 2, it will have space for more flowers in the repeat to make that custom border. I think Encore is just one of the coolest features in our software, so I hope maybe you've learned a little something more about it today. Thank you very much.